Don't you hate it when your jig tail does this? I'm going to show you how to minimize fouling. Stick around. In my last jig tying video, I demonstrated how to tie two variations of a nightmare jig. I realized immediately after posting that there was a design flaw in those jigs. See if you could spot the problem in this pic. It's hard to see when the jig is dry, but you'd experience the problem when you start fishing. If your jig has a soft fiber tail like rabbit fur or marabou, that material has a habit of balling up on the hook when you cast. At which point it looks something like this. Once it's balled up, the tail just looks goofy in the water, kind of like a wet skunk. So what do? Well, you could go with stiff materials like bucktail, but that stuff goes through the water like a fence post. There's something to be said for a soft, flowy tail that pulsates in the water. So how do you get that soft, supple action while keeping the tail from fouling up? Let's take a closer look. I'm going to tie several tails without finishing the jig. This will allow us to focus on tail action in isolation. Here's one way I see people tying in a rabbit strip. Typically they'll measure a piece that's, say, twice the length of the hook shank, and then they'll tie it in at the jig collar on the same side as the hook bend. That looks great on the tying bench. The furry side rides upright and it hides the hook. But once that tail's wet, the fur goes straight for the hook bend and it gets all fouled up. So no bueno. An alternative is to tie a short, tough tail just before the bend of the hook. That pretty much eliminates fouling problems, and it doesn't look bad in the water. The fine fibers pulsate, but you don't get the dramatic wavy action from a long strip of hide. I tend to use this method when I'm tying small jigs under 1/8 ounce. With larger jigs, that little tuft of fur just looks too stubby. Most of the visual bulk would be coming from the collar. I didn't tie the collar on this sample, but if I did, you'd see the collar material is pretty much rigid. Overall, the jig would have very little suppleness. A second alternative would be to tie a Matuka style tail. That's a type of streamer fly where the wing and tail are integrated. You can get a similar effect with a rabbit strip tied on a jig. Again, the jig isn't finished. Typically I'd do a spun collar made of synthetic fur. You can see how I did that in the Nightmare jig video. Even without the collar, the Matuka style tail has a much bulkier profile than a little tuft tail, and it's just as foul resistant. The beard isn't prone to wrapping around the hook because the hide doesn't extend to the hook bend. Let's see what it looks like in the water. You get nice pulsating action from the fibers from the long tail, and the beard bulks up the profile. I'm not liking how the beard pokes out away from the main tail. That's why I do these tank tests. Jigs and flies look different in the water than they do on the tying bench. In retrospect, I'd probably shorten the beard or eliminate it entirely so it doesn't poke out. Let's look at a third alternative, which I'll call a triple tail. This ends up looking a lot like the Matuka tie. The only difference is that there are two short strips along the belly as opposed to one long strip. This is easier to tie because you don't have to fiddle with tying the middle of the tail. You get the same foul resistance as you do with the Matuka style. Okay, let's see what it looks like in the water. Pretty similar to the Matuka style, but maybe with a little more flair. The belly strip flaps freely, so it's not tied down as it was in the Matuka style. The beard is out there waving around like it did with the Matuka. Again, you could eliminate this component if you don't like the look. And I should note one more time that the jig is not finished. It doesn't have a spun collar. So there you go, 3 ways to use soft materials as jig tails to minimize fouling. Ultimately, you're still limited in how long you can extend the tails past the bend of the hook. I'm working on ways to tie long, foul-resistant tails using soft materials. Let me know if you're interested. I can make a follow-up video when I come up with some good solutions. It's so satisfying making your own lures and flies, especially when you invent something that actually catches fish. Go ahead and give it a try. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.